Today I'm going to share with you a drawing exercise that you can do that will help you improve your creative skills. A painting came up on my social media feed and the artist had written at the top that he'd posted this painting elsewhere and nobody showed any interest in it. He wanted to know what was wrong with it. It was a good painting, it showed skill, but I could see a few issues with it. What that artist needs to do is develop his critical eye. He needs to be able to analyse his own work and identify areas of improvement. In this video, I'm going to show you a way that you can do that. Years ago, my drawing teacher would get the class to draw in the style of another well-known artist. The idea was that if we attempted to replicate another artist's style, it would enable us to pick up new techniques that we could use in our own work. It was a way to get us to experiment. It was also a way for us to hone our skills because we had to analyse the work of that artist and then interpret their style in our own drawings. I chose a famous Australian artist by the name of Shay Docking. Shay was a painter and printmaker. Her drawings had a graphic, bold quality. She used strong lines and shapes that emphasised the shapes and patterns found in nature, and her drawings have a wonderful sense of movement. I love the way the branches of her trees intermingle with one another, and I love the way she used negative space to create a sense of balance and contrast. This is one of the drawings I completed when I did my course. My style of drawing is a bit different to Shay, so I had to alter the way I normally draw when I did this. I'm going to show you two drawings that I recently did in the style of Shay Docking. I'll also show you the same drawing in my own style. While I draw, I'll talk about the process and also about the value of drawing or painting in the style of a master artist. This is my Winsor & Newton watercolour journal that I'm drawing in. I started with that negative shape on the left-hand side and then I started to build the tree trunks around it. Not only was I looking at the shape of the trunks and the limbs, but I was also looking at the negative spaces that they made between them. And that helped me to get the shapes that I wanted. And I wasn't too concerned if I didn't get the shape exactly as it is on the reference photo. I held my pencil loosely and I hardly put any pressure on the graphite. The two reference photos that you'll see me using in this tutorial I took myself. They are some gum trees that we have growing in our garden. I'm not going to include the branches on the left-hand side of my reference photo. I just wanted to simplify it. Once I got the main shapes drawn in, I had a look at the book again, just to remind myself how Shay used to do her shading. She heavily outlined the edges of the trunks, limbs and branches, which is something I normally wouldn't do. She added a lot of tonal contrast in her focal area, and as she moved away from that area, her shading became softer. She left a lot of paper showing as well, and her shading marks help describe the texture of the bark. So I thought, okay, I'll come in straight away and I'll darken the value of these edges. I'll make them more precise. Instead of having soft edges, I started to make harder marks, darker marks. When I build up depth and form in my drawings, I like to use contour shading, where I gradually build up the values by following the contours and curves of the subject that I'm drawing. So when I first started the shading, I reverted back to the way that I normally do it. So here I'm shading the way I would shade. The only difference I have made is I've darkened in those edges. It was here that I became aware that I had to change the way I was moving the pencil to add the shading. I thought to myself that Shay used a similar technique of contour shading, where she followed the shape of the subject that she was drawing. But her shading, although it follows the angle of the branches like I do, the stroke or the way she moved her pencil was quite different to the way I normally move my pencil. So here I'm starting to move it in a more circular motion to try and copy the way that Shay did it on her drawings. I knew that I would need to go darker here, but I just wanted to get the lighter values in first and then I can layer over the top. I found it a little challenging because not only did I have to draw in a style that was different to the way I normally draw, but I also had to look at the reference photo and then look at the drawings that Shay had done and then try to transfer her method onto my drawing. So I was glancing from my reference photo over to her drawing and then back to my drawing before I could even make a mark. There was a lot going on in my mind. There are many benefits of drawing in the style of a master artist. Not only can you learn new techniques, but you can develop your visual vocabulary. By that, I mean you can develop an artistic vocabulary of visual elements such as shapes, textures and lines. Then you can use that vocabulary to create your artworks, the way a writer would use words, phrases and sentences to create their written works. For example, if I was drawing a newborn baby, I would use soft, curved lines to create a gentle atmosphere in my drawing. Or I might use sharp, angular and bold lines to create a more intense and dramatic drawing of something like a dark forest. A strong visual vocabulary allows you to express yourself more effectively. By forcing yourself to draw in the style of another artist, you can improve and grow your visual vocabulary. After I had darkened the shading on my drawing, I had another look at Shay's drawings, and I loved the way she had included the hill in the background in her composition. I noticed that she used the same circular mark-making motion on the shading on the hill. I also noticed the simple flowing lines that suggested the shape of the land that she included to add some movement. So I added a hill on mine as well in the background. Analysing and copying the work of master artists can be a valuable tool for learning about composition because you can gain insight into the artist's thought process. You can begin to see how they balanced elements like line, shape and texture, as well as how they created movement in their work. Then you can start to employ those compositional techniques in your own work. I know when I draw, I don't tend to have a focal point. Instead, I maintain the same tonal value all through my drawings. And drawing in the style of Shay Docking like this has drawn my attention to that. That is something I realise I can change now. I can add a focal point on my drawings the same way I try to remember to do that on my paintings. So here I used a 7B pencil for the really dark tonal value, and then I switched down to my 2B pencil for the lighter value. I also kept using that same circular motion with my pencil. The paper in this journal is cold press paper, so it's got a bit of texture to it. So after I finished this drawing, I decided to have another go with a different reference photo on some hot press paper. So there's my first drawing completed in the style of Shay Docking. So then I thought I'll get another photo and I'll have another go. This time though, I'm working on a piece of Arche hot press watercolour paper. So I drew the trees in again, freehand. Again, I looked at the shape of the limbs and the negative spaces between them. Noticing those negative spaces or shapes is just as important as noticing the subject that you're drawing. Look for those spaces and draw them in as well because it really helps with the drawing process. I did the same thing with this drawing. I started off the shading really lightly, the same way I would begin watercolour painting. I established the shaded areas slowly using the same circular motion with my pencil. The shaded areas are shapes as well. I map them out first with a light value and then I gradually darken them. I also deepened the outline on the edges the same way that Shay did. And to shade, I used that light circular motion with my pencil as I followed the shape of the trunks. I used the 2B pencil for the lighter shading. And I used that same circular motion with my pencil. Once I had the shape of the shading where I wanted it, I switched to my 7B pencil and I used the same circular motion, but I deepened the contrast on the shading. Here's another reason why drawing in the style of a master artist is useful. It enables you to develop a critical eye. It requires you to look really carefully and observe and analyse the other artist's work. You study the use of line, value, form, and other elements, and in doing so, you gain a better understanding of what makes a successful drawing. And developing a critical eye will enable you to evaluate your own work so that you can identify areas that you might need to improve. For me, as I mentioned, I need to create focal points in my drawings, and I can't believe I didn't realise that. Okay, so there's my second drawing done in the style of Shay Docking. So there's the two of them side by side. In doing these, I learned that I can add more movement in my drawings. I need to use negative space more effectively and leave the white of the paper showing more than I do. I also need to think about where my focal point is, and I should add more tonal contrast in that area. This is my drawing that I did in the style of Shay Docking, and this is the same drawing that I did in my own style. As I mentioned, I move my pencil in a different way when I do the shading. I don't outline the edges of the subject to the same extent that Shay did. I prefer to leave a few lost edges as well. I also make use of a paper stump to blend the graphite in a few areas. What I did try and do with this drawing is increase the tonal value in the focal area, and that's something that I'm going to try to do more in future drawings. I'd also like to try and get more movement in my drawings the way that Shay did, and I think that will come from not drawing everything exactly as I see it and from being more creative with my composition. So, analyse the work of master artists, try drawing or painting in their style, and in doing so, you will learn new techniques and ways of doing things. You will increase your visual vocabulary and you'll be able to express yourself more effectively. You'll also develop a critical eye that will enable you to look at your own work and determine what needs to be improved. I hope that you found the information in this video helpful. Thanks for watching. Please like the video and subscribe if you don't already, and I'll see you next week. It was a good painting, but it showed skill. Yeah, no. He wanted to know what was wrong with it. Yeah, I don't know what I'm saying.
You could have kept going there.
Don't know what I'm saying here.
Do you want me to just do this next
Just
time?
chicka. Years ago, I can see Leo moving there. Draw. I need to say draw in the style of another well-known. Do I need to do that with my fingers?
No, that looks cheesy. You don't like it.
I need the Shay Docking book. It's here. This is where I need.
Write scripts instead of saying other artist style. You've got to say artist style.